All right, welcome in everyone. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. That's former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch. Artie, good to see you again, man. We're a little off schedule this week, folks, for our spring practice lineup, but we did make it in this week. Georgia is now past the midway point already this spring. Got a couple of news things we'll hit real quick, and then we'll hear a pretty fiery set of remarks from Kirby Smart on the state of college football. I think that's interesting. Five-star edge signee Isaiah Gibson, one of those thin position groups for Georgia, he is actually dealing with an undisclosed injury. Kirby Smart said this week. Drew Bobo, I think he hyperextended his leg as well, so he's missing some time. Just a couple of things there. Kirby Smart said they'll be back shortly, so I think they should be good to go for G-Day at least, so we can see him in action. And Jonel Aguero, right, a guy that has to step up in the DB room this year. Played the most out of any defenders as a true freshman. Last year, we were kind of looking for that year for him to step up, wondering when it would be. Former five-star, really talented DB, in there at star mostly. He's working some at safety this spring, but he actually revealed already that he broke his hand last year, missed 3 games, tried to play through the injury first, but missed 3 games. I thought that was really interesting. It kind of gives us a buffer, I think, here for a really productive spring, and then he'll have a pivotal role, I think, this fall. So he could be a potential breakout. Learning that kind of changed my opinion on where he stood. I thought that was interesting, man. And props to him for trying to at least to play through it because you didn't really hear about it. So
I think anytime a player, particularly in spring ball, who has an injury but isn't hurt, so to speak, where like he can go and like he's not going to further hurt his future, but will toughen out to get the reps because he knows he's fighting for playing time and fighting for a spot, if you will. Coaches see that and they're like, "Oh, this is a guy I can count on." So I think that goes a long way. Not everyone does that. Not everyone.
No, they do not, right? And especially in this day with the NIL and wanting to get to the pros, and then you already have your bowl opt-outs and stuff like that, right? So there's a lot of, I think players think there's a lot of good aspects to sitting out if you're hurt just a little bit. So you're looking, and Kirby Smart's looking for that type of guy. He's talked about it all spring, in this era of parity in college football and the transfer portal being right there and available and a lot of money. If you're decent, right there being available, you want to look for those guys to win national championships, and those guys are team first. And it's hard to find this day and age, right? And I think that's what coaches and Kirby Smart's one of those, or talk about a lot. I think they say it for a reason. I think they want players to hear that. And you talked about the injury too, and coaches looking at that, trying to still get your reps in because you want to earn a spot, trying to play through the injury. It reminds me of Mikael Williams because he played on that bum ankle, right? A grade 2 sprain. I've had one of those in the ankle, man. It holds you back for months, really. It's incredible how long that thing sticks around. And he was talking about the NFL Combine, how when coaches, raised questions about maybe his production, compared with his talent, you would expect a little bit more production from Mikael last year. And he had times when he wasn't his best. And really, I think the ankle played a large part. But he talked about how the coaches really commended him for that effort in playing through that injury. They were less concerned about maybe his production, more concerned about, okay, you were limited, great, but you actually played through it too because you wanted to win. You wanted to help your team. I thought that was really interesting, and I think that's a good thing for Jonel too. I'm glad he kind of shared that too. Potential breakout, and Georgia's going to need him there at star. All right, Artie, let's hear from Kirby Smart. He's asked about, the reporter posed the question. I'll give you some pretext here. Reporter posed the question about the potential roster cap. All right, that number's floated out there, 105. Okay, how settlement goes in place if it's approved. That'll be April. It's the 3rd now, so the 7th is going to be the final hearing. If it's approved, which I think a lot of people think it is going to be, that'll go in effect July 1st, and then there's a real possibility that college football programs will have to cut its roster as they're going into fall camp. And for example, Georgia has 121 players on its roster. They've got 4 or 5 signees that are enrolling in the summer. Okay, so guys are going to get cut. if that happens.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
plain and simple. It's like NFL training camp, baby. Guy's going to get cut. And he's asked about that, and Kirby kind of opened up about a lot of things in this, couple of minutes. But I snipped out the highlight here, and we'll listen to it, and we'll get Artie's reaction because I've wrote about it. I want to see what Artie thinks about it.
Know exactly what's going to come out of this. What I do know is that we're going to continue to recruit people who love football, who are passionate about football, and that don't put money as the number one answer. Like, I've never met a really good player that's all they cared about. So, like, the 105 number, the NIL number, what's the cap number, what is this going to be? There's stuff going on right now, guys, in college football. I mean, there's people reaching out to have a Zoom call and present all the players they represent that are on teams, including our teams. And they want to invite people to the Zoom so they can watch and see who's going in the portal or shopping who's in the portal before the portal. Do you want to get on the Zoom and look at all these players? I'm like, well, what if some of them are mine? I mean, it could be one of the most legendary, moments in all of college sports with what's coming up on this ruling and how people are going to try to manipulate a cap when all we're trying to do is make for competitive balance. And it's really unfortunate that I don't know if competitive balance is going to come out of it. I don't know if the kids win in this model that we currently have, if they win long term. Like long term, when we have to cut sports and cut other things, are the kids going to be the winners of this? I don't know. College sports been around a long time and given many an opportunity. And by all means, I want these kids to make money. But what's going on right now is not good for anybody.
Your thoughts, Arthur Lynch?
Yeah, it's a funny so I agree with him 100%. And I know that I have been a big proponent of paying players and players making money. I was at my godmother's birthday today, and my grandmother was the wife of a high school and college football coach for 50 plus years, and
Wow.
Knows football very well, and we're somewhat of a football family, and she's a purist in every sense of the form, high school and college football, and she's like, how did it get to this point? And you and I have kind of belabored that, where we've talked about where we are now and where we're going, but how did we get here? And I said, I think we got here because of the incompetence and the selfishness of the NCAA. The NCAA, the two major issues that we have in college football right now is probably the transfer portal. Everyone would agree. And this wild, wild west mentality of the NIL. And both of those things came to be brought to us by court cases that the NCAA lost. Had the NCAA gotten ahead of both of those issues 10, 15, 20 years ago, we might not be sitting where we are today. So that's my personal opinion on where I think the fault should lie, right? And what I think what's going on now into what Kirby is saying is, yes, the courts or this legislature is now about to pass this bill, and we're about to have red sharing, right? And the NCAA is still stubbornly getting in the way because they don't want these student athletes, particularly these student athletes from two major sports, basketball and football, to be employees, right? I don't know if you follow Jay Billis. Jay Billis was interviewed recently. Jay Billis was a former Duke basketball legend. Then went to Duke Law. He practices law. He's also an ESPN analyst, but he's always been pro player for years. And he's been kind of a thorn in the side of the NCAA for years. And he was like, what the NCAA should do is come to a collectively bargaining agreement, making these college athletes employees of the university, right? And they sign contracts. They get paid. if they decide to transfer, the school that is going to acquire them buys out their contract with the previous school, and that player transfers, but they have to, effectively give back the money or buy out get their contract bought out. And they also can get cut and get fired, right? And that's kind of how this is where it should go. But what Kirby's saying is this revenue share agreement that is being, what's the term in politics, that they're legislating from the bench, meaning laws are being dictated in the courts as opposed to being passed in Congress.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, right? Obviously very different, and this is about college sports, but there's these challenges in courts, and then as soon as inevitably the players are always winning these suits because the NCAA is not a governing legal entity or body. It's just this kind of like nonprofit thing that ruled with an iron fist for years. Then
what is
players were just like, wait, let's go sue these guys. And they sued them about NIL and won. They sued them about transfer portal and won. And they're about to sue them again for this revenue sharing or house pass or whatever it is. So my thought is with Kirby is football is going to be all right. Basketball is going to be all right. But, if you're the father of a daughter, or your son is a wrestler going to West Virginia, right? Or your daughter wants to play softball at University of Illinois, it's like there's programs across the country that are going to go from being like competitive Division I programs to probably club, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what he means, because Kirby, I think, is, you got to remember his wife played basketball at University of Georgia, right?
Yep.
My guess is 3 of his kids will play college sports in some capacity, just based off genetics, right? Like, and they might not be Georgia football players or Caitlin Clark at Iowa, right? But college sports is a fundamental part of this country, both at the Division I, II, and III level. And I think what you're going to see, because the NCAA's lack of leadership and, to be very clear, vision and innovation from a very early start, right? This should have been going on in the early 2000s, late 90s. Instead, they've, they were negligent. Yeah, they botched it. And now now I think it's blowing up in their face, and they don't know what to do because they don't have any leverage.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer. My sisters play college sports. None of them, nothing, track Division I and Division III, but sports played a huge part in their lives, right? And I think where Kirby's coming from is when he says these kids long term, I don't think he just means football players. He's like, my football guy's going to make money. You know what I mean? But
and we'll lose some because of the roster cap. Yeah,
right.
But I think you're spot on when you're saying he's referring to everything, all this
everything
that could be cut, and we don't. And it's such a wild west, Artie, and that's what makes me always think about this when this comes up. When Kirby Smart talks about it, or Brian Kelly, whoever steps up to the podium and talks about this way, I always think of there's no regulation as far as the transfer portal goes, and I think that is the thing that pisses the coach off so much right now. That's kind of the creme de la creme of piss me off right now, is the non-regulation of the transfer portal, the tampering that goes on, and it's the wild, wild west. And I think the NCAA, they could have jumped out in front of this. When you said that, that's what made me think of, and at least tried to regulate or have a model of regulation for the transfer portal. And I think that's what's it's really ruining kind of the offseason right now. And then you can even look back at when the winter transfer portal opens during the stinking playoff. Like, that's just crazy. And where was the foresight on why it was put that way? I guess it's all class schedules and stuff. I don't know, man. I haven't seen a good reason for it, and it's going to be changed, I think.
But again, right? It's like, why do they fight this idea of this idea of keeping players non-employees and students? Like, my mom went to Boston College, and she was a nursing student, and she worked for the university. She worked in the cafeterias, cleaning trays, right? Like the Boston College paid her salary, right? Like you can be an employee of the university. The only difference is tens of thousands or millions of people watch these employees do their job, right? It's like, and the NCAA could solve a lot of problems. Would they lose money on the bottom line? Sure, they probably would. But if you also operated this thing like a business, which it is, and consolidated power and had a commissioner and mimicked the NFL and the NBA or Premier League soccer, it's like the amount of money you would be ultimately be able to make on behalf of the league would allow you to have employees and allow you to work with the schools and allow you to maximize the TV contracts and the revenue sharing from the media rights deals. But to your point, which we have discussed, right? It's for whatever reason, they just want to like hold on to this idea of like amateurism and like purity. It's like, dude, that ship has sailed. You know what I mean? Like the genie's out of the bottle you're not putting it back in. So you need to think outside the box and get creative, or else there will be damage done to college athletics in the very near term, in the very near future, where like a lot of like historic programs, winning programs for different sports are just gonna be cut because they don't keep the lights on. And I think that's what Kirby is referring to, and I think you agree. And sadly, as just a sports fan in general, and I have a lot of friends outside of the football realm that I went to school with who I love as people, and I wouldn't have met had they not been recruited by their respective teams at UGA. It's like, I don't know if they'll be around, right? And that's tough to rationalize.
Yeah, it's very somber, and I think there is still some hope, right? For me personally, I try to be, a glass half full kind of guy, especially with something I love so much in college football. I think we both agree on that one, Artie.
Oh, totally, 100%.
So I think for me personally, it's like fix the transfer portal windows and push it towards where it's more, like you said, a professional thing, to where you're signing when you're a player and you sign that NIL deal that comes with all that money and you sign to a program, you have certain things you have to live up to. You can't, if you're healthy, you got to play games, no opting out. Transfer portal, like the point of contact, just like the NFL has, and tampering period and stuff like that.
No, free agency period.
Yeah, use that model, right? And kind of limit these Zoom calls where you got guys who just want to make their dollar representing athletes, right? Shopping. That's the weirdest thing I've ever. Zoom call? Are you kidding me?
Can I talk about that real quick? And I'm gonna omit some names because they're friends of mine. But I was with a friend of mine who played in the NFL and in college football up north, and then he played in the NFL, and very close friend of mine. And he works in finance. He's done playing, but he's got friends who also played, and they have become representatives, let's just say it, representatives, both at the NFL level, but also the college level. In the NFL, if you're an NFL agent, man, you get 1% to 3% of the contracts that you negotiate for your players, right? You are bound by a set of rules that are agreed upon between the NFL league and the NFLPA, right? You're an NFLPA registered agent, right? You're only getting 1% to 3%, et cetera, et cetera. He also represents these college kids, right? Who he meets growing up in the youth camps, et cetera, and then they go on to college, and he represents them from an NIL perspective, and he gets 20% of money, anything, dude. If it's a car dealership for 10 grand, if it's a $2 million NIL thing from Kentucky to Louisville or whatever, and he gets 20% off the top. There's no regulation. He doesn't say. He just says, "Hey, I want to represent you," and the kid's like, "Okay," and he's like, and that's it, right? I'm sure there's a contract agreement, but there's no there is no regulating body that's like looking out for the kid. And to be frank, who's looking out for the agent too, because he's just kind of like, he doesn't know what he's doing, right? For the most part. And
because it's such a new thing, right?
Yeah, we were having this conversation last night, and he's like, hey, at the end of each season, my guys call me up and they're like, hey, this is what I was, this is what our deal was last year. He's like, can you get on the horn with our other coaches and see what else we can get? And he just calls other coaches. And he was on a phone call with Bill Belichick 3 weeks ago, right? Negotiating a deal for one of his guys who was looking to transfer to UNC from another Power 5 school. And he's like, that's nonstop. And it's, the contracts are basically non-binding, right?
Yeah.
It's and I think, and look, I don't blame this guy for doing it because he's making a living. And to be frank, I don't really blame the athletes either, because it's just like they're just operating within the system that is in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doing anything illegal. They're not doing anything that's like, I don't know, frowned upon it's fringing upon ethical. They're just like, hey, this is the Wild Wild West scenario the NCAA has given us, and we're going to maximize every dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I think everyone is a little at fault. Don't get me wrong, but I think the big perpetrator of all of this is the NCAA. And I'm not even sure if they have the power to fix it at this point.
I think the courts have told us they have no power.
Yeah, and I think it's up to the commissioners of these big conferences to kind of figure it out, and that's going to be interesting because then it's a Game of Thrones of who's the top guy. You know what I mean?
That's a great way to put it. It's the Game of Thrones. You've got the Lannisters at the helm.
Yeah,
dude,
no doubt, dude.
Where's Jon Snow? But yes, we could talk about this forever, so we'll move on. But yeah, Kirby was not happy there, and I think that really kind of sums up how things are right now.
And I'm proud of him, by the way, for sticking up for because that's what he was talking about. Like,
that's why he said he's getting $13.5 million per year to his roster, and then you add whatever the collective can raise on top of that for football. So yeah, that's a good point because he's set with football. He's kind of concerned about everything as a whole, which I'm sure down the road would affect football a little bit too. But yeah, crazy times, and we'll see what happens April 7th. Sounds like it's going to go through. But let's get on to some practice notes here, Artie. We'll end with some spring wishes. We'll keep this one tight. But interesting enough, and it's interesting, but it's not surprising. And basically what I'm hearing from the first scrimmage is the defense is considerably further along than the offense. Right? And we can expect that. You can even look back on how things turned out last season and then consider all the new faces. And on defense, yeah, sure, you've got a couple of transfers in there fighting for spots, mostly just young players who have been in the system who are taking that next step. Mm-hmm. The other side of the coin, though, maybe opposite the offensive line and gunner and maybe the tailback room, you have this receiving core, some young tight ends. They're all trying to learn the offense while operating against the number 1 and number 2 defenses, which are going to be really talented for Georgia next season. So it's not a big surprise. But I think it honestly, it does pick me up a little bit as far as the defensive front because we have so many questions there with, 90% of your sack production gone. The linebacker room, it just keeps getting mentioned with Chris Cole, who I really raved about our first spring episode, Artie. He's really, I think he can be used in so many areas, guys. Just look for him. This is potential all-SEC season from him, all-SEC season. Justin Williams, another guy, didn't get as much snaps last year. He's already turning heads in his second spring at Georgia. And you add, CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson with this group, dude. I'm so excited to watch these linebackers. Let's turn to the offense because this is kind of where our focus should be, I think, based on what I just went into. But Zachariah Branch, from what I'm hearing, dude, he is as advertised. And I think the thing that I've heard that is really impressed has been his ability to learn each day and progress faster than was expected. And I think he knew that challenge. You get to hear him talk to the media this week. He said all the right things. You know, you don't know exactly from those press conferences, as you know, Artie, but he did say all the right things. You know, he's asked why he came to Georgia from USC. It's basically like it was kind of an easy decision considering, and he named all the good things we want to hear, which is culture, you know, the coaching staff being experienced, the players wanting to play for each other, and all those good things. So I think that makes me happy right at this point. We'll see how he progresses athletically, and a leader is the words I'm hearing for him. Pairing well with Stockton, who's had a good spring, man. He knows the offense. I continue to hear good things about him. Noah Thomas, the 6'6" transfer from A&M, right? What you're adding a massive piece of that offense with a guy like that. Been very, very dependable. One of the best as far as possession receivers so far in practice. So he catches passes, what I mean, guys, and Georgia fans rejoice. You know what I mean?
Don't get me started, Coach.
And then Dylan Bell splitting reps at receiver and running back, man. So he's really bought into that. Georgia's bought into using him then that way. Let him be a Swiss Army knife, dude. Because you got a guy like Cash Jones, too, who can play some slot, too. Really interesting there. Running backs. Bo Walker. We talked about Bo Walker in pretty good detail last week already, but I want to mention here Chauncey Bowens, too, because Kirby's mentioned him, right? Other players are talking about how good is he doing, and practice-wise, he is also turning heads. You know, you're missing the Robinsons, Branson and Roderick, so getting more reps here, and Chauncey, he deserves a highlight as well. I think he'll play well. And Dwight Phillips there, another young pup in the running back room to look for. And stop me if you have any note here. All right, I'm just kind of going through these.
No, you're good. You're good.
Cool.
I got a couple of things yet.
Cool. Offensive line. Important to note here that you're missing Monroe Freeling. You're missing Daniel Calhoun. Those are two projected starters, right? And I think when Monroe was healthy last year, he impressed me. When not so much. That playoff game was pretty tough for him. So you're missing those two guys. Ernest Green's been working at right tackle. Bo Hewley, Jazar Jackson, the massive former basketball player. He's worked at left, him and Hewley. Seems like Drew Bobo is going to be the answer at center. He's actually dealing with that injury, but he'll be back shortly, so I don't think it's a big situation. But on that note, I've heard struggles here as Georgia deals with those injuries and is trying to find who they want to roll out in the fall. Nothing, I think, to write home about at this point. Already there's a lot of reps to be had and a lot of coaching to take place before we see that, the starting five that ultimately trots out. But I know Drew Bobo, and we got to hear him speak to the media as well, and he was talking about how he's wanted to play Georgia football all his life. So I think that's a really great story. And as far as for his work ethic, he always gets praise about that, right? He's doing the right things. He was the number 680-something recruit ranked nationally by 24/7 coming out of high school, man. So it'll be a good story to watch, see if Drew Bobo can get this starting gig, which I think he is.
Drew Bobo will never remember this, but I remember when him and his – so this is a true story. When I was getting recruited, my first visit to Georgia ever was June of – June of 2008. And I visited there with my mother and my grandfather. The day before, I was in Urban Meyer's office holding a national championship trophy, whatever. My mom did not like, she different story for a different day, but she did not like Urban Meyer. She didn't
like the car salesman.
No, she wasn't. She was not gator shopping. I was kind of fired up, but anyway. And we meet Bobo, and Mike Bobo married a beautiful Georgia girl, Lainey Bobo. She's a saint. But they had two kids at the time. I think they were like 4 and like 3. Drew was the oldest, if I remember correctly. And Bobo was like, "Oh, my wife just had kids," and I was like, "A kid." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." He's like, "We had 3 of them, and they had triplets." And so they had 5 kids within 5 years. But
wow.
I watched those kids grow up, right, for like really 5 years. And they would all 5 of them very good athletes, like tough kids, because they were all such close in age. But there was a bunch of them. There was 5, right? And then obviously McLennan, B-Max kids were there, Lily's kids were growing up there, and all of these kids, you would ask all of them, even the girls, you'd be like, what do you guys want to do? Like, we want to play Georgia football. We want to play Georgia football. All of them. And they would sit there and they would play full-blown games, like in the little indoor facility. And so when I saw, Drew starting to get recruited, and then Coach Bobo and Coach Friend were at Auburn, I was like, man, this is going to be bizarre if Drew ends up at Auburn and
he almost went. He almost went.
When
he committed to Auburn, I think
he was.
Yeah.
And I texted Bobo. I was like, man, it's fucking. Sorry, I just dropped the F-bomb. I was like, it's crazy that Drew is like A, offensive lineman, but B, like a guy,
Mm-hmm.
And so to see him, me and my mom were talking about it because she watches all the games, and I was at school, and she's like, can you believe Bobo's son's playing? You know what I mean? And when I say this, there won't be a guy, maybe Gunnar Stockton, because that's in Gunner's DNA.
Yes, it is.
But there won't be a guy in that locker room suiting up for Georgia who will care as much about the University of Georgia, the state of Georgia, the red and black as Drew Bobo, because it's in his DNA, right? Like, I know a lot of people have mixed emotions and mixed feelings about Mike Bobo, but one thing you cannot say about Mike Bobo is how much he loves the University of Georgia and the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. And he used to fight. The defensive players used to come into the offensive meeting room the night before and listen to Mike Bobo's speeches, because Bobo would be damn near in tears talking about what this game means to him and what the program means to him. So that is in the DNA of Drew. When you're an offensive center and you're just a nasty SOB in the trenches, like that's the type of guy that you want. And he's obviously got a quarterback's brain from his dad. Man, yeah. I'm pumped for Drew Bobo. I hope he stays healthy. But that's a little diatribe, but I'll never forget that little sucker. I was like, I never thought he'd be 6'5", 320. But
yeah, that's a great story.
What I mean? It's
and
really good family.
We should clip that for recruits. If you're, not a highly rated guy and you want to go to play for your home state school, whatever school, regardless, like whether it's Georgia or not, caring that much and having that fire, that'll get you some snaps, buddy. That'll get you some snaps, man.
David Andrews, I think, had 3 offers, like App State, Michigan State, and Georgia. And he was a 10-year NFL vet, 2-time Super Bowl champion, team captain of the Patriots.
Yep.
And that dude was a 2-star or whatever.
Exactly.
6'1", 295.
Dan Jackson, another one, right?
Dan Jackson.
It happens, man. So don't, I feel like, the recruiting process for guys who aren't ranked highly or maybe not have as many eyes on them because where they play or, where they come from, what have you. It's something that you should really put out there. I think former players who are able to do that. It's happened. It keeps happening. Just stick to it, man. Stick to it. Spring wishes here. We'll get through this and we'll call it already. So name any that you think of here, but here's mine. Spring wishes for Georgia football. Some progress to be made in these areas for me. If I'm thinking about from perspective, okay, will this team contend for a national championship? And I think personally, for me, this is what I would like to see from that aspect. Keeping the front 7 talent out of the portal. There's going to be some guys who may finish this spring not where they want to be. All right, they might be battling some injuries, right? And they miss some snaps, and then out of losing that snaps, another guy kind of takes the job, right? Seemingly in spring. And we've seen it happen before where guys jump in the portal, right? Because they want to be starting. Maybe they don't think they're going to start. They could be a different player by fall camp, but for all the other reasons, they want to take that opportunity. Well, at this point, I don't think Georgia can afford that. I don't think they can if they want to be at their best. So that's keeping Gabe Harris, Darren Inkanagban. It's a hard one. Nasir Johnson, Namdi Oboko, Kristen Miller, Jordan Hall, those guys. Making headway. This is second. Making headway on the run game and run defense. We talked about that last episode. Already Kirby Smart has put an emphasis on that. I've heard the snaps as far as the run offense are really – it's the key for Georgia right now. I think they're taking this opportunity this spring And especially with the questions at offensive line too, just getting as many reps there as possible, right? When Georgia was really good, they could run the rock when they wanted to, and they could stop the run when they wanted to. And Georgia, I think they know they need to get back to that. And Kirby Smart talks about it all the time. But it's another thing. And I don't know if we're going to know this at this, during the spring, right? Never know what happens on G-Day and how these guys are going to look. But I'll definitely be looking at the run game on both sides here. Make it easier for Stockton. That's what it's going to do. It's going to make it easier for Stockton, and you control the game. You lose game control on defense. You can't stop the run. Really affects your offense, of course, on the other side if you can't run. And with a guy like Stockton with one start under his belt, give him some help, man. Set up those play actions a little bit better and throw it to Noah Thomas in the end zone on a one-on-one because you opened up because you can run so effectively. And then a couple more here. Start getting the most out of the receiver talent. This potential of this group already and I've been looking more into it and thinking about this. The potential here is great. Right. I mean, we were not happy with all the drops last year. And nobody is. And it was crazy. And we couldn't find an answer already. I was asking, he was like, is it Yips? And you were like, yeah, dude, it has to be Yips. I was like, I guess so. I mean, this is like, duffing a chip 5 foot off the green on the 18. Like, that's what you're doing, man. It's just Yips here. So the potential here, though, to not only be better in that aspect and just be a stinking D1 college football player and catch the ball. The potential here is to be one of the best rooms we've seen in a long time. And I'm talking about and the national championship seasons. Just that all the talent. You get Colby Young back. He started to get in a good groove before he got, suspended. You got all the incoming freshmen who I really like, and, Taylor. You got C.J. Wiley, Landon Rolden, those guys. You got London Humphreys coming back and made some big catches last year. Dylan Bell can do it all. Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas, those guys, right? The talent's there, man. I just get the most out of it. I think that's what Georgia hasn't done, is when they've had the receiver talent, they don't get the most out of it. And my final one here, Artie, I'll give you a shot here, is getting Puglisi ready to back up Gunner.
Yep.
It doesn't look like Georgia's going to get a quarterback in the transfer portal. Man, all the major, I think, contributors are already somewhere. And if they go to double dip, as in they transferred winter and they're going to transfer spring, that does not look like a guy who Kirby would sign. That's not a Jaden Rashada case. I don't see that happening. Could very well. If I had to put money on it, I wouldn't. So I think getting Puglisi ready, and we talked about how this is his really first true spring after missing last year with injury, right? Missed out on reps in fall because it was Gunner and Carson. And now he has the potential here to really push Gunner and be the backup. So got to get him ready, man. We know injuries can happen at any time. Georgia fans know this very well, i.e. Carson Beck, SEC champ. Get him ready and prepared as the number 2 option here. Those are my spring wishes. I think if Puglisi looks good in G-Day, and when I mean look good, I mean processing his reads and executing, not forcing the football, taking some, head-scratching plays out of it. Just execute. And I think that would be a good sign for Georgia fans. But those are mine. Artie, you got any that come to mind for you?
Yeah, really 2 highlights. Well, first, I think 3, at the top of this, we talked about the defense. None of us are really worried about the defense, and I think that's the case. I think what I hope and what I think is happening right now is the defense is far ahead of the offense. But what people need to realize is this defense that this offense is facing week in and week out, and day out, I should say, is about as good as they're going to see next year. So it's going to put them in a prime position to play, at their peak performance early in the season because of the people that they're playing against every single day. So that's not really a wish. That's just an observation from afar. My first wish is, we talked about Drew Bobo, and we talked about not wanting to lose guys in the front 7. I think because of who Drew Bobo is, because of the type of person that he is and the player that he's going to be for this offensive line, I want to see him become a leader and an anchor and kind of build the team within the team of the offensive line. I know you and I have had an episode or 2 about what that offensive line is like, and I think we had Colin Houston on last year to talk about that. I think that's super important. Why is that super important? Because Gunner Stockton, who has been around for a while, is a tough kid who's smart, who's well-liked, who's a great leader. he still needs to get his feet under him as a starting quarterback for the University of Georgia football team in the SEC. So that kind of leads me to my second point of wish list. I really want to see Gunnar Stockton, as much as I want to see Ryan Puglisi be able to be a viable backup, I want to see Gunnar Stockton take that next step in his evolution as a starter and get super comfortable, not only as, not only as a leader, which he seems to come, that's like a natural fit for him, right? Guys want to play for him. He's kind of a rallying cry type guy.
He's got the moxie. He's got the moxie. People like
But
moxie. They like it.
Love it, man. Love it. They love it. My buddy Zach Mettenberger, he had that same moxie. And like that's why LSU guys loved him and Georgia guys loved him and guys in the league loved him. But I think for Gunnar, he's like, it's time to mature as a quarterback, right? Like, and obviously I certainly don't see him every day. You've probably seen more of him than I have. Like you definitely have. But like, man, you're a stud. You're the all-time leading passer in Georgia high school history, right? Your name is up there with the best of the best at all levels. It's like, be confident in your ability and go out and start dicing them, throw the dimes that we know you could throw. And that's kind of my next thing is become you're already the leader. Now, like, become the same baller that you were in high school, right?
Yeah, Artie, the word that keeps coming up to me when you're talking about this aspect is command.
Yeah, totally.
Command.
Like, go grab it, dude. Like, this whole thing for you, like, you're already a Georgia legend at the high school level. Like, go cement that freaking legacy, dude. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, be the dude.
You're getting me pumped up, dude. Put me in, coach.
I think he will just because he's got the intangibles, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I think the third thing is, unless you're like a Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen, like a Michael Vick, Johnny Manziel to a little bit lesser extent, but the same, like, if you're a quarter, you can't do it on your own, right? And we need these wide receivers it's time to like put up or shut up type deal. You know what I mean? And, I know we mentioned, oh boy, what was the Texas A&M guy? I had this thing up here, Noah Thomas, right? Like, I love a big dude who's been a dependable wide receiver already in the college game. He's old. I hope he's mature. He seems to be mature. But, like, dude, you're 6'5", wingspan of a power forward in the NBA. Like, Gunnar, man, go throw him the rock. You know what I mean? Like, go let that dude make some plays. And my number one wish list, because I do think we'll get the running backs, by committee.
Yeah, they're so talented, man. I'm not worried. And ESPN literally named that as a worry. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't see it. You do? Okay, that's fair. I don't.
But man, we need the receivers to really step up, right? Because Gunnar is going to be a baller, but like he can't throw and catch, right? He'll put the ball where it's supposed to be, but receivers got to be able to make plays, man. And
yeah, and we saw that, or we saw that during his first start, and even at times against Texas when he was just that's a tall task, okay? But the playoff, Gunnar didn't lose us that game, and I was really impressed by his accuracy and his timing. I was really impressed by both of those things, and so I don't, unless he drops off somehow or just can't take the pressure, which he's given us no sign that he cannot, then it's going to be on the receivers.
Yeah.
For the most time. Of course, you're going to make some bad throws. Okay. It's going to happen. But
I mean, look, Will Howard, I actually became pretty high on Will Howard at Ohio State. And I know he's got a Megatron over there, but all four of those receivers and tight end were making plays for Will Howard all throughout the playoff. You know what I mean? Like, they were not dropping balls. They were physical. They were running over people, outrunning people, making tough catches. Like, and Will Howard's a good player, but he's no better from a talent perspective than Gunnar Stockton. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
But his guys make plays for him. And it's time that these receivers for the Georgia Bulldogs start making plays for their quarterback. And I think they will. But that's my hope. Wish list,
dude. Yeah, and I think there's a good chance they do because it is a largely new look group. And I think there's a fire lit under these guys, man. From what I'm hearing, they're really practicing hard. I know the offense hasn't been great against those defenses yet, but a lot of things that go into that. But these guys are still learning a lot of these new weapons on the outside. So definitely watching those guys close here in just a couple of weeks, man. Is it next weekend? It is. Yeah, next weekend.
Yep.
Wow,
same
man.
as Masters, right?
Yeah, dude, it gets here so quickly once we start spring. But we'll end it there. I think that's a good place for us, Artie. Thanks for your time, man. We finally got this one in. Things happen, but we'll be back, guys. We'll be back next Wednesday. We're gonna go for honest expectations for G-Day. So
all right.
We'll go through that, and then we'll have a special after G-Day takeaways, and we'll try to get that in on April 14th. It's a Monday, and kind of end our UGA Football Live spring coverage here of Georgia football. Until next time, Artie, we'll see you, man.
Go Dogs.